Hey everyone, welcome back to Two Marine Dads and episode 3 of our podcast. Today, John and I are going to dive into some hot button issues a little bit, depending on who you are, but it's going to range from, just getting shit done to white privilege or any kind of privilege for that matter, and some politics, and maybe even finish up with a little bit of ancient aliens if we so desire, because those guys are super serious. But John had done a video a little bit earlier this week, about just getting the work done. And it's a big thing that a lot of people fight with, me included. It's, working through issues and spending too much time planning or too much thinking or trying to get things perfect before you actually execute versus just going out and starting. And that process is the most important thing that you can do in any endeavor in your life. It doesn't matter how small or big it is. Just start. Because you're never going to be able to predict all the problems. You're never going to be able to predict all the issues you face. So you can't solve them until you have them. And you don't have them till you start. And
you got to work your way through it. You got to go through. You don't know what roadblocks are going to be popped up. You just got to go do it. You know, the biggest thing, like you said, is not being afraid to make mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes. At the end of the day, let's just hope you have more W's than you have losses. You know, but you got to do it. Again, showing up, like I said in the earlier video, is like showing up's half the battle. The rest of it's just not being afraid of what somebody else thinks. The moment you do something different or differently than the next guy, you're gonna create ruffles. You're gonna create, you're gonna create a little bit of tension because now you're separating yourself from that other person, and how their reaction is based on them, not you. And whether you're doing something good or you're doing something bad, you should be learning from those mistakes, but you have to go do it. You end up like fucking Congress, where you try to come up with all the different, make everybody
a
happy all the time.
comprehensive bill that does everything all at the same time, and nothing
Right.
ever gets fixed.
You just gotta go. Yeah, and nothing happens because of it. You put yourself in a box, and you just got to remember there's no box. These are the United States. There's no box. You can go do whatever you want as long as you're following the law. You're not burying people on the south side of the border.
Well, and it's such a common problem that I don't think that a lot of people realize how much that's the simplicity of the problem. That's all it is you just got to get to work. You just got to start. It doesn't matter what it is. Even if you got to work out, instead of trying to plan the perfect workout or plan the perfect meal or plan the thing, just go for a walk. Start doing walks every day. If you have 20 minutes, go for a walk. If you have 10 minutes, go for a walk. And all the way up to the most complicated things. Start my other YouTube channel. I went through several iterations trying to get things perfect and teach myself, and I wouldn't do videos unless I had everything perfect. And then I just started putting videos together and clipping them the way I wanted them and putting the information that I thought was valuable in them. And what ended up happening is, holy shit, a video did really well that I was like, this video's whatever. This is just a throwaway. I'm testing something out. And I did it, and it does really well. And I'm like, man, I never would have thought it. And I figured out what made that video did really well. But I would have never known that by trying to think it out. I had to do the work. And because of that, the more work you do, the more results you see. Now, it's got to be smart work. You can't just sit there and beat your head against a wall. You got to iterate. But that's part of iteration is, failure, for one. Iteration is a huge part of failure. And when it comes to my experiences with leadership, whether it's me leading or being led by others, that was one thing that hindered that process the most of getting shit done, was a fear of failure, and a fear of failure from the people doing the work, and a fear of failure that were leading. They didn't leave any room for error. There was no room for mistakes, and they discouraged mistakes to the point where people were pitch locked,
afraid to move.
They wouldn't they wouldn't do anything because they were so afraid of fucking up that they would either not do anything, or they would make sure they could blame somebody else if something went wrong. That's what their focus was to make sure they could blame somebody else. And one of the things that I struggled with the most with as a leader, trying to learn what to do, was not necessarily to encourage failure, but to encourage failure. Encourage trying, and talk about failure, how important failure is. The best things I've ever accomplished in my life were done through failure.
Right. It is amazing. Like going back to like the Marine Corps, when they tell you, when they put you in a ring with, we were doing the whole martial arts thing, and that whole program started, and so you're in a ring with or not even in a ring, you're out in the field, you know, and you got boxing gloves on, and you're learning to strike, and you're learning how to move, you know, and you're in with somebody else, especially somebody who outranks you, you know, like they just pick you and you get in here and this is how you're going to fight. It's amazing. Like once you learn and you've failed and you're afraid of it or whatever, and you get punched in the face, once you realize, hey, I didn't die, you know, this didn't kill me. Yeah, it hurt. Now I need to keep my hand up, you know, next time.
Yeah.
So like you learn, but like it's kind of like the whole fight turns into like your blinders get taken off, and all of a sudden, once you've learned to not flinch, when you know, like all of a sudden you can see him telegraph, you can see him drop his shoulder, you can see everything. Whereas before you were just kind of all tense and afraid to do anything because you didn't know what was going to happen, but you had to get in the ring and start swinging before you learned to like not flinch and not be afraid of a fist, you know. So, but it took that iteration of actually doing it and getting in there, and then again, like not being afraid, A, and then B, like a C would be, you know, being having the intellect to make the change. Like, okay, I got punched in the face, that hurt. I'm gonna keep my hand. I'm gonna block it next time, you know, or I'm gonna duck, you know, like.
Well, and I think in my experience with what you have in the corporate world, if you will, the the challenge is when something goes wrong, right? Everybody sits down. So in construction, for example, right? When there's an accident, you know, a piece of equipment, and we won't even get into somebody getting hurt. Just a piece of equipment gets damaged, or a material gets, you know, you drop a pipe and break a pipe that has to be replaced. You know, something that costs money, and you know, everybody sits down and talks about it. And instead of getting to, you know, a lot of times instead of how to make something better, there's like this overarching cover your ass kind of approach of, here's what we can do to make sure this never happens again. And it's like, this is an over exaggeration, but it's like, let's say somebody slips on a ladder, right? All right, we're never going to use ladders again.
Yeah.
Okay, you are correct. That will keep people from ever falling off a ladder again, but we can't do the damn
But now
work
you
without a
shackle
ladder.
them.
We can't
Yeah.
do the work. So there's always a
Right.
method to where you've got to find that balance in between, with uh, not putting, you know, it comes down to holding people accountable for the failure, but not rubbing their nose in it like a dog that shit on the floor or something. You know, you talk about it a lot, and it's you know, praise in public, criticize in private. And that gets into a big part of this. It's just one of the many pieces to this whole idea of the concept of it being okay to make a mistake and learn from that mistake and make things better. You know, in my mind, if everything goes perfectly on something, like absolutely perfectly, like I'm not talking about to an outside perception. Somebody sees from an outside perception and sees everything go perfectly. I'm talking you're inside the nuts and bolts. In the end, at the end, everything went perfectly, but that's because you fixed some unknown problem in the middle that just didn't ever manifest into a game stopper. That whole thing is fed by failure. And if you have something go perfect from beginning to end, in my mind, that just means something went wrong that you didn't know about.
Or you didn't learn anything, and so like the adage, you know, you learn more from a fight you lose than when you win.
Oh yeah,
um you know, big time.
thousand
um
percent.
yeah, so like you said, reacting in a way that is healthy. You know, Michael Crichton wrote a book, I believe it was Michael Crichton. If I have this wrong, I apologize. It's called Rising Sun, and it describes, and I think there was a movie made out of it, but in it they describe
Mm-hmm.
in detail how the Japanese just kicked our asses in the 1950s. I'm sorry, in the 1960s and 70s. And one of the biggest things they highlight in that book is how here as Americans we want to fix the blame and not fix the problem. And like 90% of it is, look at your younger guys, look at your older guys, open to what they have to say, you know, but don't be offended when they have a correction to make. Don't slam them really hard when they make a mistake, and go into it with a solutions, like doing with a solutions type mindset, not a blame. And everybody here very quickly wants to point fingers. It's this guy, it's this guy, this is what happened. No, what was the real problem, and how do you fix that, and who cares about allocating blame? When everything's fixed, then we'll go back and figure out how to allocate blame,
Well,
you know,
and
or how to
on
avoid it.
top of that, you know, it's competing goals, if you will. You know, people that have a goal of career advancement that is in conflict with the organization you're working for. You know, they are able, their advancement doesn't align with the success of the company. And that sounds stupid. Like what place would ever do that? Well, there's lots. I mean, it happens all over the place.
Yeah.
Whether it's through currying favor and covering the ass end of their superior, it might hurt the company with what happened, but because you helped a superior out, you're going to advance faster. There's all sorts of things that happens, and that's just a cult. That's a culture inside the organization. I mean, you saw it with officers in the military, and not all of them, but where their career advancement was more dependent on some box being checked than the welfare of their fellow Marines or their junior Marines. So the term of getting thrown under the bus, that got talked about probably 4 times a week in the squadron. Oh, this guy got thrown under the bus. Oh, that guy got thrown under the bus because somebody didn't want to make the difficult decision and stand up for their men. And they were more concerned about getting promoted to captain, major, colonel, or going to the Pentagon or something like that than they were with
Yeah.
and part of that's perception. I was an enlisted guy, so I didn't understand. I don't fully understand the dynamic of what it's like being an officer in the military because I wasn't one. But now, after I got into where was in control of a bunch of engineers, guys that worked for me, that reported to me, that I think looked up to me. I kind of understood that a little bit better. And there was some perceptions of leadership in the military that got completely turned up on their head. And that was 15 years after I got out. I guess it's not quite 15 now. What are we, 12 or 13 now? But, and it all boiled down to people being afraid to make mistakes and doing and then just doing the work. It's not just not being afraid to somebody who's not afraid to make mistakes is not, it's not that you don't want to have no fear, because somebody who runs around like a bull in a china shop isn't going to fucking help anything, John. But
I resemble that remark a little bit. What do you mean? I got enough diesel and steel over here that says we can do anything we want. See, I can't move that crane.
The
D9 that says we can.
But that balance between not being afraid of failure, but owning your failures and learning from them is one of the greatest things that I learned to do. Is to not be, not have a stupid idea in a meeting, or not be ashamed when an idea I had failed completely miserably. That was an awakening moment for me to be as successful as I was and do all the things that I did. Was getting past that fear of failure.
Right. And again, it goes back to leadership, doing the work. I mean, with me, we were setting up the pug mills. I'd never even seen a pug mill, and how do you set it up? Where do you put your ag piles? Where do you put your grizzly? All this kind of stuff, like it was like how to be the most efficient. And then when the guys would come to me with an idea, I'd say, okay, let's try it. If we don't like it, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. Oh shit, that was a mistake. We won't do that again. So, and again, it was trial by error. And other guys would come in with experience and, and have already seen it. And they're like, why are you doing this? And scratching your heads. You're like, well, I don't know. It's the only way I knew how, and no one taught me.
Because you weren't here a month ago to show me how to do it your way.
We arrived here because, and then you listen to what they have to say, and maybe what they have to say helps you. And maybe they're not familiar with all your problems, and you were doing it the right way the whole time. So, again, it's a matter of pride, I think, works itself into it, and that was another distinct difference between going back to the Rising Sun book is that Americans are like a manager on an assembly line in GM wouldn't take advice from the guy, holding a screwdriver. But the guy holding the screwdriver would go to his boss in Japan making Hondas and say, hey, if we increase the diameter of this switch or whatever, it operates better. And they would listen to it, and there was no, well, he said it. It wasn't my idea, so therefore I'm not taking it up the chain. It was just fucking implemented.
Little thing.
And built a better product.
You take this tab off of here, and it takes me half the time to do it.
Correct. But be open to listen to the guy down below you, and not have it be a source of pride, where it hurts your feelings. So therefore you don't take it, to the next guy up.
Pride and ownership is a good and a bad thing.
Right.
You want to have pride in your work, but at the same time, it can hinder changes. You're so obsessed with having, with your project and what you did and it being your baby that you don't want to listen to anybody who wants to change it because it's yours, right?
It's yours, yeah.
And
how dare you come in? But
right,
but again, going back to just doing it, just get out there, fucking start, and then figure it out. You will fail, you will fall down.
what we're talking about here, it reminds me. It's the second book of Jocko's. You know, got Extreme Ownership, but a second one of Dichotomy of Leadership. Um, there's so much in there outside of leadership, the dichotomy. It's this whole idea of yin and yang and what dichotomies are, right? You know,
Yeah.
you can have too much. You know, it's with somebody who's laissez-faire versus micromanager, right? Those are the
Mhm.
two opposite ends of the coin. Somebody who just lets people do whatever the hell they want, and then somebody that won't let them go piss without checking in. And
Right.
the perfect place is a balance somewhere in the middle. You know, you
Correct.
don't micromanage people, but you still hold them accountable.
Yeah, you still got to
And
steer the ship. You still got
and
to make
and
sure.
and that concept, if you look at everything, almost everything in life, when it comes to decisions and things like that, and you apply that concept, you look at okay, what's the extreme on this end, and what's the extreme on that end of this situation specifically. All right, so okay, I figured those out. This is what micromanaging is, and this is what laissez-faire is. So how do I take the best of those two worlds, you know, and bring them together and find that little crossover spot? And
Right.
that's your good zone. That's the place you want to be, and that's where you want to strive to keep things. And it's a constant battle. You're always swinging one way or the other. And the idea, I guess, is just to spend the most time in the middle.
Right. I mean, and when you talk about leadership and getting crew buy-in and stuff like this, I mean, out in the field, those guys, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm not. There are others within the company who I've absorbed their men, and they absolutely love working for me. You know, and it's amazing what they'll perform, how well they'll do, and it's the simple stuff that you do. Like when they make a mistake, it's your fault, and when you're successful and you've led them, it's their fault. You know, so like when we dug the hole. In my previous video, I explained how I dug a hole that you could fit a couple homes in. They didn't like that,
It wasn't a
and that
quarry,
was
though.
that was potato, whatever. um, but it was their idea. Let's dig the hole here, and you know, I authorized it. So when the boss came in, he's like, "Why are we digging a hole here?" I was like, "Well, I gave the order, and this is what we did." You know, but it was a group thing, and at no point did I point a finger at any of my men. I would never, you know,
Yeah.
unless they're burying a body, and you know, so I tell them that, hey,
You mean if they get caught burying a body?
if they get caught, don't get to the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. But no, like if you're doing something that's even remotely defensible, I will defend you all the way to the ground because that's my fucking job, you know.
Yeah.
So I did that, and in front of, you know, there were a couple of guys there, my boss and others, and after they left, you know, after the brass left, they all came up to me like one at a time, and were like, "Thank you." You know, it's rare. He's like, "I've been thrown under the bus numerous times by my boss," you know, and he's like, "You didn't do that," and it just scored points like that. Just, you know, the word got out that, hey, Door will get behind you no
Well,
matter what. You know?
and it feeds to that whole idea that people aren't. It makes people not afraid to make mistakes now. They're willing to come up with crazy ideas. I mean, I'm trying to think. You know, when we were down in Vegas, and it's strange to say that I can't think of anything crazy we did when we did. I mean, literally 2 or 3 times a week, there was something we're like, screw it, let's try this.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of those ideas turned into a patent, for Christ's sake.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And
Barnard's patent into that. Yeah, and it
the
worked. It worked swimmingly. Yeah.
I mean, things like the batch plant, or you know, the way some of the stuff Tracy Chambers did when he set up stuff in the underground when we were pouring concrete. You know, and it wasn't that it was super complicated; it was that it was simple. He got
Yeah.
away from complicated, and things like that, and not just him, but some of the guys, some of the tools and kits those miners had come up with underground to make their
Yeah.
lives easier. Just little, I mean, and it literally make it underground. Just, I mean, Sean, he was so funny. He, you know, he's like, man, I thought farmers came up with some crazy ass, you know, redneck fixes. They don't hold a candle to these miners and what these guys
Yeah.
will come up with to do
Yeah, to
stuff.
make their job, so they can do their job easier and safer. You know, going back to, and I'll use you an example. Like you you did the batch plant, kind of pioneered it. I believe it was the first time we'd ever done it, where we self-performed our own concrete.
No,
And
no, no. It just first time in a
but
long
like
time.
we set it up, and the one lesson we learned going through it, and I think a little bit it was pride, like, hey, we can figure this out, was the mix design. And it took us what, a month to figure out the proper mix design to make good, good,
Well, each one.
material that would
I
test
mean,
up.
you can go ask Mike how many. I mean, you weren't there for this, I don't think. Maybe you were, but when we were beating our heads trying to figure out the shotcrete mix design, That
Right.
was probably the most awful 2 or 3 weeks we spent fighting that, trying to
But
get it to pump.
and then at the end of it though, like there were two things. One, we went to like the manufactured. We went to I guess natural sand versus manufactured. And then in your case, we brought in the expert and paid him the $2,000 and said, help us. And if we would have looking back, like, hey, that's something we learned through the iteration. We set it up, we went through, we figured this
Well,
out, and said, hey, we could
that
have done this better.
process, yeah,
You know,
that battle and process you're talking about, the huge thing about that was is we came up with a self-consolidating mix design that we could make so economically that we were putting it everywhere.
right? We used it
Because
everywhere,
it
but
reduced. And when you start talking to people about using SCC everywhere, they're like, oh my god, because we bought it from town, it would be 3-4 times the cost. But because we were able to, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it wasn't even double. It was like 50% or 30% more expensive to make the SCC. And it worked out so well that we poured it and we're able to cut our pour crews down on some of these things. Instead of having 6 guys climbing
5
around
areas.
in horrible spots, you had 2 dudes.
Yeah, and then all the voids went away and all the rest of it. And it
I
was a
mean,
matter
and
of, but it was a matter of
thousands,
iteration going through it.
tens of thousands of yards of concrete we poured. And
But
the
that was
only reason we got there was because, like you're saying, is because we failed. The only
we
reason
failed.
we got there, if somebody came in and just given us a mix design and we rolled with it, we would have never have figured that out.
No. But then at the end of it, we were like, hey, next time, let's ask the guy who does it for a living. Like why didn't that thought process happen like week 2 instead of like week 4?
Well, it
And
did and it
so
didn't. But it was more of, it was kind of one of those things where, until, like you said, you don't know who to ask for a problem until you have the problem.
right.
We didn't, Dan, me, and Alex, and Granger, and Tracy, and none of us had ever really done a batch. I mean, we'd seen them from the outside, but the actual inner workings of it and how
Right.
one operates and all the little finicky things and, some of the stuff that you think the margins are this big, but they're really actually about this big. And then some of the things you think that are not important,
Are extremely
they
important.
they go off and the whole fucking batch plant shuts down. All that
Yeah.
process of learning all of that and getting that knowledge is irreplaceable.
Right. And there's only one way through. That's to show up and do the fucking work. Period.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with the pipe. You don't know. A long time ago, I was told, you end a job and you look back and you look at it and you go, man, we started this job. I had no clue, and you had a plan. You're like, this is how we're going to do it. And you look back, and at your traps you made, and you're like, wow, this was so different than what I thought we were going to start with, and
that was
assembling the pipe's a good example.
That was the beauty. That was the beauty of Lake Mead, man. Is we got so used to doing brand new stuff that none of us had ever done before, or that we'd only had one guy that had a little bit of experience, or we leaned on somebody that wasn't at the project but just for some advice. But we did it all ourselves. We did. I mean, I don't know of a single discipline we didn't touch there at Lake Mead over the
all the gigantic pipe, man.
Well,
and how we started and what we thought would worked. And then you go to the next one and you're doing it 34 times. And you go to the next one and you're like, well, let's change this. Let's change the rigging by 2 inches. Let's add a chain fall. Let's tack weld this first. Let's tack weld these little tabs on the side of the pipe. You drop the ring down. The thing self centers. It's a simple thing. We fought on the first one for like half a day to do it.
Made the insanely difficult look like
just boom, like butter,
like kindergarten
again,
kids.
It wasn't all my ideas. It was the men. It was everybody being allowed to talk. But once you dial in your team and all that, and it works great. And the only way to do it is to start. And there's kind of there's not really much to it. I mean, you're not privileged in any way. You just go out and you go do the work, and it doesn't matter what you look like or any of the rest of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had probably one of the most diverse crews ever, in the middle of Lake Mead, and they were all out there busting their asses together. There was no, well, this guy's advantaged or that guy's advantaged,
Well, the ones that were like that didn't last very long. It was too hot.
It's true. They were too yuppie or whatever. But like, I quite frankly, with in today's day and age, with privilege just being thrown around as a verb almost, or I don't even know how to describe it. It's just used for everything now. I just don't personally. I don't believe in privilege.
In my mind, it's an excuse.
It's an excuse. Yeah.
And it's, on both sides of it. It's an excuse for somebody who isn't doing well to say, I'm not doing well because of this.
Right.
And whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter, because if you go into everything with a I'm going to fail, I'm already predestined to fail, you're never ever going to succeed ever at anything.
Right. And that is far and
And then
away
on
the worst thing in the world to teach somebody.
and then on the other end of it, it's used as an excuse to not be held accountable for some other stuff. Oh, this is only happening because I'm white and I've got privilege. And it's like, okay, well, that's, you believe that, so what are you going to do to change it? Well, I can't change that I'm white, so I can't change it. It just is what it is. So it's an excuse on the other side to not have to correct things that you might be doing wrong, or not helping, not giving charity, not giving back to your community, things like that. The things that would actually affect that. I think it was probably one of the most offensive things that I've ever had told to me was that I'm where I'm at because I'm white. And I've had it said to me. And it was one of those things where I got so mad that I couldn't even talk anymore, which is pretty rare for me. Usually when I get mad, I get a little bit more talkative. So it went past that point.
I was going to say, it's such a rarity that you clam up. You usually talk a lot.
The
others in the room, we know.
So to say that I'm only where I'm at because of the color of my skin, and it has nothing to do with how much work or effort, blood, sweat, and tears that I put into something, the sacrifices that I've made to reach where you're at, regardless of where you started. You can talk about white privilege all you want, but some of the most destitute communities, drug ravaged communities in the country right now are white trailer park, middle of nowhere boony, white trash, what people would call white trash. Those are the most, so you can't tell me there's white privilege. The opioid epidemic doesn't give a shit about, you wouldn't think it cares about color, but it overwhelmingly affects white people. Just like some of the drug epidemics in the 80s affected black people. It's a cultural thing. It's not because
crack, wasn't a white drug, it was a black drug, right?
Which led to the crime bill and all the other stuff, right? And the war on drugs, and that's all part of the pieces to that,
right? And I didn't mean to step on you there. You get like a guy like Bernie Madoff, who is arguably one of the most richest white people, I guess in Florida, he's a billionaire. And right now he's sitting in prison braiding his fucking cellmate's cornrows. You know what I'm saying? And then you have somebody like Herman Cain or somebody like, why can't I think of his name? He's the HUD secretary right now for Donald Trump.
The surgeon who, brain surgeon.
I can't think of his name right now.
It'll come to me. No, Herman Cain was the 999 guy.
Like HUD housing in the inner city, and the dude, figured out a way to get out of that, and then turned into put himself through school and got, became a brain surgeon, and now he's the HUD secretary for the United States.
And there's tons of anecdotal evidence to it. And
one's white, one's black. There's no.
Well, there's a black. Right. You look at the Barack Obama administration, and Eric Holder and Barack Obama himself. You got Susan Rice, Ben Carson. The list goes on. That doesn't care about color, and the idea that white privilege. I'm not saying that there isn't privilege in the world. There's definitely privilege in the world. Anybody born in the United States, or anybody basically living in the United States, is far more privileged than everybody else. But that's not a bad thing. You're not bad because you're privileged. You're bad because of the actions you take. And that's the problem I have with it, is you're privileged because you're white, so that's just bad. It's like systemic racism. It's the idea of talking about systemic racism. It's this amorphous thing that you can't actually put numbers to, and you can't actually say exists. It's this, it's like, so when you talk about white privilege, you have to inherently ignore a bunch of facts. Things like if you look at the median incomes of most minorities, Pakistanis, Nigerian immigrants, which is funny because, they're black. I'm pretty sure last time I checked, people from Nigeria were black. Sheik, Japanese, all of these ethnic groups that are definitely not white do far better on the average than white people do. Yeah. Far better. And
you're not kidding.
There is issues. There's issues where somebody sees, I think the only stat that I've heard that actually pushes and supports the idea of some kind of systemic racism, though I don't think it does, but it could be used for that if you wanted to play devil's advocate, is that when you look at the interactions between cops and blacks versus cops and whites or cops and Asians or cops and Mexicans, the when they get physical, or the tendency to use physical for that confrontation to turn physical, is way disproportionate on the black when it comes to black interactions. And I haven't seen anybody really talk about that or try to defend it or not defend it. But on the flip side, when people talk about, blacks being arrested more often than whites, it's because they commit disproportionately more crimes. When you commit way more crimes, you're going to get arrested more as a population of people. Now, they're not committing. I'm not saying they're committing crimes because they're black. I'm saying that the culture that people tend to have in their communities, and whether you like it or not, people tend to stay with their race. It's just how human nature works. That's a conversation for another time. But that's why you have Chinatown. That's why you have Little Pakistan. That's why all the Somali immigrants in Minnesota all form their own.
That's why you have Little Havana down in Miami.
Exactly.
You have Little Haiti down in Miami. It's the truth. And you can pretend it's not, but it is.
And there is integration and there is mixing, which is great and dandy. But the issues are dealt to a cultural issue in the way things are working. Now, it's kind of like this snake eating its tail problem, where one problem leads to the problem that starts the problem in the first place, and you're just kind of in this death spiral, it seems like, with like inner cities and cops, right? You've got more crime in inner cities, so you have more cop interactions, and those interactions make things worse, which make people trust the cops less, which makes more crime, and it's just this endless cycle, and trying to break that loop is extraordinarily difficult, and that's the problem we face. But it's not because white people are more privileged than black people.
Right. No.
There's the white people in the inner cities are just as much problem as the blacks. They're just way less represented. You don't see them out there.
Right.
In fact, I would feel way less safe as a white person in some of the shitty neighborhoods in Chicago than I would probably anywhere else on the planet. Because you stand out. You stand out.
Right. And you touched on it earlier. You talked about systemic racism, and like when you really dig into what systemic racism is and how it's defined, it is absurd. Like, it's the concept that you were born into as a white person. You were born into a system that is built for you and not for anybody else.
Well, no, worse than that. It's not just, it's built upon the idea that you're going to succeed based on others' failures.
You're right. And in some way, somehow, if you make $1, you're taking $1 away from somebody else. But now here's the tricky part. And I've heard another author refer to it as a double loop, or what do you call it? A double bind. And he said, so you're thinking, you're not even having an active thought. You're subconsciously racist.
Yeah.
So you can't even control the idea that you're having because it's in your subconscious. So therefore you can't touch it, kick it, or point at it. If there's a fucking law that is, disproportionate to black people, or
it makes my head hurt.
Right, yeah. It's a ghost. You're fighting a ghost that doesn't exist. And systemic racism does not exist in this country anymore. It did at a point in time. You could point and say, yes, it did.
Not as a whole. There might be a sheriff in some small town in the South somewhere, or I'd say the South. It could be backwoods of Pennsylvania. They're just as redneck as anybody in the South. But
racism doesn't exist. That's real racism.
Well, they could be systemically racist. That sheriff could be that system. But as a whole, like they try to claim that this whole system of the United States is systemically racist, you have to really do some mental gymnastics to get there and ignore a lot of shit and push a lot of stuff up. And when you try to test white privilege, right? If you try to like pin it down and actually put numbers to it, you can find statistics to support it. I mean, you can, but you can find statistics to support the Earth's flat. That's not a convincing argument. And at the end of the day, if you can't, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's say for argument's sake that white privilege does exist, right? It doesn't matter if it exists if you can't convince people that it exists. Because if you can't convince people that it exists, you can't change it.
there's nothing to change. Is the
Well,
whole
no,
point.
I'm just
It's a
saying.
growth
Yeah,
system.
but I'm talking. That's what I'm getting at. Is and there, it's gone from this point now where the people that are on this side of either systemic racism or white privilege and all of this stuff that's kind of mixed together in this honestly this Marxist push is where it all boils from.
Oh, yeah.
They realize they can't win the argument. They can't convince rational people of it. And because of that, now they go into shaming. They go into shaming people,
Yeah.
belittling them, yelling at them at restaurants, threats of violence, depending on where you're at, scare
Yeah.
tactics, or legislation. They're going to legislate it. And it's like hate crimes, right? Hate crimes are, in my mind, are one of the most asinine ideas on the planet. Not that
Assault is
they,
assault.
not that they don't exist. Not that there isn't a hate crime. And if you want to categorize so you can track them, okay, this is a hate crime, this isn't a hate crime. But the idea that a
Yeah.
punishment for a hate crime is worse than not is one of the most in the aspect of race or religion is one of the most asinine things on the
Sex later
planet
on.
because you're saying that one race. So if a white person kills a black person and the crime is this, but that white person kills a white person, and not the crime, but the punishment is this,
Yeah.
but a white person kills a white person and the punishment is this,
It's absurd.
you're inherently saying that this life is worth less than this life.
Right. What was
You
it,
know,
21 Jump Street, where the new one, where he comes in and says,
I
so
didn't
you gotta
see
pick
it.
the cool kid or whatever. He said, you gotta pick the biggest guy in here and just knock him out. And he walks up to the black guy and just hits him, bam, knocks him down. And it turns out the guy's gay. And he's like, you hit a gay guy. And he's like, no, I hit him. And then he turned gay. And they made it like, you hate gay people. And
Yeah, right.
It was nothing like that. He wanted to show dominance or whatever. But and that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, he punched a guy in the face in the movie. It was comical, but if you punch a guy in the face, it's assault, period, or battery, and it just shouldn't matter whether you punch a gay guy in the face or you punch a black guy in the face. If that crime should be whatever the punishment is, and having a carve out is just absurd. You've literally created a two-tier law system.
And you've created this. Well, not just that, you've created this system now where you're trying to prove people's intent.
Right.
Which that's a scary. That's Minority Report shit there. When you try to improve why, because you can never ever prove why somebody did something. You can never do it. You can't know somebody's intentions, even if they say what their intentions are. You don't know that because that's actually what their intentions were, because they could be lying to you. You can never know why somebody did something. So a legal system needs to be based on what you did. Did you do this? Yes. Okay. Well, because you did this, this is the crime.
Right. Exactly. Period. And that's what made America so awesome.
Now, if this is the hate crime punishment for doing something, and this is the non-hate crime, I'm okay with raising that up to here. I don't care. I'm not saying bring it down. Just don't differentiate, because you're inherently saying one is worth more than the other, or one is worth less than the other. And that's kind of this idea where you get into, I think is kind of the premise where people see white privilege, is you start setting people's perceptions to where, yeah, there is a difference when you kill somebody. If you go and murder somebody and you only murdered them because they're black, that's worse than if you just murdered somebody. I mean, you can think that on a philosophical level in measuring evilness and whatnot in the other, but at the end of the day, that's not how a legal system works. That's not how a fair legal system works.
No. At the end of the day, I mean, the difference in those two examples is one guy is a murderer and the other guy is a racist and a murderer. like you're saying, in a philosophical sense of what you're.
Well, and you don't know, and you don't know the other one isn't a murderer. He just, for at that point in time, he didn't kill somebody who was black.
Right.
He could still be a racist. He just didn't act on it.
Which is the problem. Which is, like you said, like that is the problem with this whole. And I talked about it before, where there was a teacher and she had all her students. Everyone starts off in life a little differently, and therefore some people are richer, therefore they're privileged, or if you're a male, you're privileged over the female, or if you're able-bodied and you got two legs, you're somehow you're ableist, and you got an advantage over somebody who's in a wheelchair. All that kind of stuff. It's like, what? There's some MMA fighters out there who are female I'll never get into the ring with unless I have a gun. We're not doing this. So I mean, like, you
a taser,
break it down.
a taser
It doesn't exist, huh?
A taser.
A taser. All right, we'll use a taser. We'll water it down a little. My taser shoots 357 Magnum slugs. But no, that's the whole thing, and it just does not exist. And like I said, the example the teacher gave to prove to her class that privilege exists was everybody in the front row balled up a piece of paper, and she put a big trash can in the front row, and she said, everybody shoot it like a basketball into this, into this trash can. And everybody in the front row got it. And then she had them sit down in the second row. They like one or two missed, and then the third row like 4 or 5 missed, and then the back row like only like one guy got it in. And she goes, see, everybody starts life in a different, at a different place, and this is the definition of privilege. The guys up front have a privilege that you don't have in the back. And one of the kids in the back jumped up, ran around the class, and then slammed it into the basket, like he was fucking, I don't know, LeBron James or something.
Right.
And he made the basket, and like the idea is, but what did he do? He ran to the front and did the work. He did the work, said, how do I do this? I'm starting in the back. I can't make it from here. That's obvious. I got to do something to change my position in life. And he fucking walked to the front, ran to the front, whatever that he was, and made the basket because he knew that's what I wanted to do. So he did the work. He was disprivileged or underprivileged or whatever the fuck the word is. And then he made it so he could be equal with the people up front by doing the extra work.
Well,
so like and you apply that in business, you apply that in your life, and you are not.
And there is
underprivileged.
I think this is the problem with it too, and this is why so many people buy off on it, and so many people can do the mental hula hoop or mental gymnastics to get to they think white privilege exists, and it's because privilege does exist. There is privilege. I'm not going to argue that. So somebody who's born to a better family is inherently going to have a better chance at success. If they're born into, if they live with everything plays it out. If you're born to a middle-class family, your parents don't get divorced, and you're raised by two parents, you are more successful in life overall as a statistical number than people who that are born into a single household or not. And
right.
It's kind of funny me talking about this because I fly in the face of that because I was raised by a single mother and I turned out fine. But
I'm not sure fine's the word I'd use, but all right.
I was going to say normal, but that doesn't work either.
That's even worse.
So what happens is they take this idea of privilege based on socioeconomic status and they muddy it with race. And they take the idea that, majority black communities as a whole, if you look at the numbers, they are less privileged than white suburban family. Inner city black versus white suburban neighborhoods, right? Far less privileged. Lower rates of getting through high school, higher murder, higher infant mortality. Across the board, everything's worse for the inner city black community than the white community. But it's not because they're white and they're black. It's because they're in the fucking inner city and they live in fucking suburbia.
Right.
It's safer in suburbia. Period.
They built it. They built it that way, and they've worked their ass off to get there.
Well, and they maintain it. They maintain it.
And they maintain it.
They have.
You got. But like you said, and I'm going to back your point up here in a different perspective. I will never ever be as talented on the basketball court, no matter how hard I work, no matter how hard I try, as LeBron James. Period.
There's inherent talent in certain things.
He was born to grow, 6'7" or whatever the hell he is. Like he was born that big, and I'm not. I'm 5'10". Doesn't mean I can't get better at it, but he will always outperform me, no matter what. Even if he gave me a trampoline, like it just is. He's bigger and just can do it better, and he's trained hard for it. I'm not taking anything away, but he's also spent his whole life working towards it. And he's worked his ass off to be there, and like think about like, I don't know, Tiki Barber, even now, he could fucking out sprint me, I could train all day and not be, for years and never be as fast as him, So, I mean, there is like genetic, advantage, if you want to call it that, where you are privileged, to be that tall or that fast or have that in you, but it also takes a shit ton of training to do it. So yeah, there are inherent privileges, but it's a matter of what you do with them. I mean, like I said, the Bernie Madoffs of the world can end up in jail just as quickly as the inner city Ben Carsons of the world can end up sitting in the cabinet for the United States. president. You know, I mean,
And
it's
it's not
equal.
to
The
say,
opportunity
and
there.
it's not to take away from the hurdles. I mean, there are more hurdles for somebody who grows up in the inner city than there are for somebody
Yeah,
who grows up in suburbia. But there's
right,
also, I mean, you look at the most successful people in the world, and their next generation is usually pretty awful.
right, because they're not doing the work.
They don't ever do the work.
They don't do the
You,
work.
as a person as a whole, in my just as a person, when I look at somebody and their character, if you're somebody who had to, if you had to work your whole life just to eke out a middle class life, you're probably way better than a person who just partied all fucking
Hmm.
your whole life. And I can't, I don't know Paris Hilton, so I can't speak specifically about her, but that idea of somebody who never had any real responsibility with anything and
Right.
was handed a lot of stuff at life and was able to live life at a level that most people, she was just born into that life, right?
Right.
And again, I'm trying not to be too critical of her. I don't know her personally. I can't attack her personally. I'm just talking. It's an example that people understand. Her dad worked his ass off to build that company and get it to where it was,
Right.
and she didn't. But she got the advantages of that in her life. So yeah, she's a little privileged. But what she's given up because of that, I think, is far worse than somebody that has had to work through life.
Right.
And I guess one of the things we talked a little bit about it that I hate the most about the white privilege argument is that it sets people up for failure because you're telling a whole race of people that it doesn't matter what you do, you're always going to be at a disadvantage. Which means a
Right.
lot of those people are going to go, "Well, fuck this, I'll just hang out. Why even try?"
Right. Um, just like as human beings, you know, I think I heard Joe Rogan say this. As human beings, we've evolved on this, you know, on this planet. We were just built or whatever, but like it wasn't through ease and it wasn't through privilege. It wasn't through, you know, laid back, chilled life. It was through strife. It was through famine. It was through war. It was through natural disasters. It was through all these things, these terrible, terrible things that happened that created the human beings that we are. It was disadvantage that made us better, not advantage. And you get weaker when you're advantaged. You become more lethargic when you have everything handed for you. You know, like the king. I mean, how many times have you seen kings and are they skinny? No, they're fat slobs because they're sitting there and they're not doing shit. They got to be the most bored fucking people in the world, you know. And then the knights are out there doing all the work, you know, or whatever, you know. But like through life, there's the difference, you know. Like so, when you tell somebody, oh, they're disadvantaged, no, they should work their ass off to do something better, to better themselves, because that's our nature as human beings. We want that. I don't want to say we crave violence, but it's that
Conflict. No,
the violent things in life happening to us
we
is what
crave
makes us successful.
people crave conflict, and it doesn't necessarily have to be
Sure.
physical conflict. I mean, that's why
Right.
people seek out, if your life is boring and nothing, conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? When you
Right.
go for a run, that's conflict. When you are trying to sort out a problem, that's conflict. When you're trying to
Right.
figure out a fight with your wife or why your kid's crying or what, those are all conflict. That gives you purpose. That gives you meaning. That's what it kind of boils down to. But the killer is, I think, the biggest problem it boils down to with this whole white privilege thing is it wouldn't be nearly as big of a argument right now if it wasn't for the current state of politics and media. Right now, power brokers need people to be incredibly divided to maintain the power they have, and the media needs people to be pissed off at something or scared of something or fighting something
So they
so
can
that
sell ads.
they continue to sell ads. And
Yeah.
I don't know a solution for either of those at the moment. I haven't given a great deal of thought about it because I'm more worried about my little world than I am, fixing United States politics. But this, and it might just be because of when I came up in politics, through the end of the Bush administration to Obama. But I blame all of it on the Obama administration. Not all of it. I mean, there was obviously some still there, but things took this weird change during the election for Obama. It became so tribal. It became so much us versus them. And then you threw race in, and not tribal in the aspect of race, tribal in the aspect of left versus right. But
Leverage right. Yeah.
then you threw race into the middle of it because you couldn't question anything Obama did without being called a racist.
Yeah.
To the point that if you didn't vote for Obama, you were a racist. It had nothing to do
Right.
with the idea that he was raised by a fucking avowed communist that is all of the horrible things about his past
Yeah.
when it comes to
That,
somebody that you'd want to run for president. The fact that he had no experience in governance whatsoever. He'd voted on, I don't even remember the number anymore, but he'd actually voted yes or no on like 3 bills in the Senate. He abstained from most everything else.
right.
All of these things didn't matter. It was because he was black. That's the only reason you're not voting for him.
Right.
And
Now,
and just like when you give kids an excuse to do something that they see that works, now the whole world sees, man, if you use race, they can't even argue with you. So now that became the crux of every political argument out there, regardless. Trump's
yeah.
trying to say that he wants to build the border wall to keep the bad people out. And now it got turned into Trump says all Mexicans are bad. When in reality, the border wall is not really even keeping Mexicans out. It's keeping Hondurans and fucking
Yeah.
uh, uh,
Panamanians and
Venezuela, not
Mhm.
Venezuela, the most of the central countries, a lot of Honduras, but
yeah, Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. There you go. You're all the immigrants that are crossing Mexico trying to get in. That's a majority of what you're keeping out. So the idea that it turned into this political crudgel that was incredibly effective because people in my mind are, well, people are intellectually lazy, right? They want an easy excuse to support their own ideas and their own thoughts. So it's really easy just to call somebody racist than it is to argue with them and actually have to rationalize your own thoughts and your own way, your own beliefs.
Yeah, that again. It goes back to what I have to find his name. He termed it a double bind,
Yeah.
and so if you didn't vote for Obama, then it's because you're a racist. So you have to actively prove that you're anti-racist by voting for Obama. So no matter what, you're in this camp. They make you their argument places you in this camp with the Ku Klux Klan and these neo-Nazi fuckers, and and anybody else. I'm sure there are others out there.
Oh, I mean, I've heard people
But
argue that you're
they put
racist.
themselves they put themselves into that same camp with these evil people, and they're like, well, I'm systemically racist and I don't even know. And so you've kneeled to this idea of the double bind, where if you're not actively, you have to say, well, I'm anti-racist, here's what I'm doing to prevent racism, which acknowledges that you're a racist and puts you in the same camp with these hooded fucks. And then now you've made everybody a Klansman, and I'm like, no, I am not going to kneel into this systemic racism argument, because it's bullshit. It does not exist. I am not a racist, and I'm not going to capitulate, and I'm not going to ask others to kneel. I mean, right now you've got people who are kneeling and apologizing to people they don't know for shit they didn't do.
Well,
Because of the color of their skin.
what's
It's like, it's fucked.
I got into an argument on Facebook. How productive those usually are, but and I was doing it because I like doing it, not because I'm trying to change somebody's opinion, but it makes me dig into my own beliefs and makes me understand them better because I have to research stuff. And it was in Portland. A lot of people were talking about the protests in Portland because of how racist the police department was and how systemically racist the system was. And I started doing a little digging, and I don't know, I didn't look at any other departments, but the minority in the Portland PD, the actual Portland Police Department, the minority is white people. The largest percentage of cops are blacks, followed by Hispanics. I think there was less Asians than white people. I'd have to go back and look at the thing, but definitely fewer white people than black people in the police force, and white and Mexicans. Like it was blacks, Mexicans, whites, and then I think Asians. So you've got probably one in that aspect, and I hate using these terms, but the most progressive police force in the country, probably, as far as multiculturalism, if you will. And you're going to say that it's systemically racist when it's wrong. I mean, look at Seattle. The Seattle Police Department was run by a black woman who they made quit because they made such horrible policy decisions as city council.
Right. Right.
A black woman was running the PD in Seattle.
Right.
And you're going to call it systemically racist?
Yeah. It's such a load of horse shit.
And you get into looking at if you go to look at the BLM page and you go look at the names, like the rallying cry of names like George Floyd and all these other folks out there. There was only, I can't remember now, but there was only 2 or 3 of like the 15 names they name that were like, okay, yeah, this is a cop doing something really bad that he should be punished for, or she. And you know what? In all 3 of those cases, Two of them, the cops were both in jail. They were tried and punished for their crimes. And the third one was awaiting trial, but had been fired from the police force. And I haven't looked at it since. This was like a month ago. There was talk that they were probably going to arrest him because because that's where the investigation was leading. You know, you look at George Floyd, and there's a lot of facts that are out there. Should the guy have done what he did? Probably not. But at the end of the day, everybody right now, the coroner's pretty sure George Floyd died because he ingested like 10 times the lethal dose of fucking fentanyl. Ingested it. Which means he probably had, and this is all presumption, this is trying outside the court of law, but when generally somebody ingests that many drugs, it's because they had them on them and they swallowed them because they didn't want to get fucking caught.
They didn't want to get caught. And, you know, and with the George Floyd, for like a split second, we had unity. Everybody who saw that video was like,
behind. This is bullshit.
Arrested, you know?
But then it spread into everywhere. But then it was like everything is systemically racist. It's like, what's his face in Wisconsin? That's another one that really pisses me off. Not just because it led to Kyle Rittenhouse's situation, which fucking makes my head explode, but which maybe we talk about that too later on another podcast, because he actually got out on bail today. 17-year-old kid had to pay $2 million in bail. Are you fucking kidding me? But anyways,
like 3 felons.
What led to that was
It's a favor.
Yeah, one of them was a child rapist, and the other one was a fucking wife beater. I can't remember what the third one was. I think he was a pedophile or something. But anyways, the event that led to those protests that eventually led to all that, I can't remember the guy's name, but the football players were wearing his name on their helmets and shit. When this guy literally raped the woman he was there, the reason the cops were there is because this woman called.
Yeah.
Because she had a restraining order because this guy raped her. And he was back. And he had a knife on him. And he's reaching into a car. And the cops shoot him. And all of a sudden it's bad. And it's like, what the planet that we're living in right now, and you're seeing everybody's reaping the rewards of it now. Cops are refusing to do their job, which I don't blame them. I called it. I said, this is the outcome of what's coming. Is cops are going to stop responding. Yeah. They're going to stop getting in the middle of shit. They're going to wait till the crime is
getting hired on. They're going to stop.
Well, that too. But the cops that are there are going to wait till the crime is over and clean up the mess rather than try to stop it. Because now when they try to stop it, they get crucified.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fucked.
I can't remember. It was a community organizer, and I think he was from it was Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or New York somewhere. I want to say it was Newark. I think he was a community. I could go find it, but they took this guy and he went in and he did the shoot or no shoot training scenarios with the police. And this guy was a vocal anti-police, police are shooting too many people kind of guy. He completely changed his world after he did that training, and how fast and how hard it is to make situational choices.
Yeah.
Now,
you don't have a time. You got to make a split-second decision whether or not you kill somebody.
One of these guys that ended up going to jail, that's one of the names that was listed, right? It's a tragic thing. I think it was her aunt. They were at her house, and her nephew were playing Call of Duty. So they had headphones on, and they're playing Call of Duty on an Xbox, and the front door got left cracked open or something. So somebody called in a welfare check. So the cops show up to the house. And in the process of them, a rookie cop went around the side of the house, looked in the window. She heard like dogs barking or saw a shadow outside. So she got her legally owned handgun and was ready to defend herself in her home. The cops hadn't announced themselves. This rookie cop sees her in the window and shoots her and kills her without announcing himself, or basically shot as he was announcing himself. Horrible situation. The cop did a lot of shit wrong leading up to that moment. And you know what? He's in jail. Doesn't fix the fact that she's still dead, but that's how the justice system works. That whole event right there is like, that was the worst of all the scenarios that I saw of a cop on duty. The other one was that chick in Texas. I think it was Houston or Austin or somewhere, that female officer that walked to the wrong floor and walked in the wrong room of her apartment and found a dude she thought was in her apartment and shot him and killed him. And he was in his own goddamn house. Yeah. She's in jail too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There was another gal shot a black guy. He had like gum in his hand or something in Oklahoma. And like you see the video, you're like, dude, it's horrific. Like she murdered him. He wasn't a threat to her. And he's holding freaking double tape or whatever the hell. He wasn't holding a firearm, and he got executed for it. And she's yeah, same thing. She's being brought up on charge, or was. This is like 2 3 years ago.
Well, one of the things I
Um,
saw in Seattle, I saw a protest in Seattle, and it was being streamed by some people that I have a lot of respect for, that are really intelligent people, and they were at a Black Lives protest in Seattle, and it was peaceful. It was a very peaceful protest, but like halfway through, they start shouting, "Hands up, don't shoot." Hands up, don't shoot. That whole fucking thing
yeah,
from what's his face in Missouri.
yeah, sorry.
What was his name? This is during the Obama administration.
Yeah,
They're Holder and all them. Fuck, I can't remember his name. And that whole thing is a lie. That whole premise of hands up, don't shoot is a complete fucking lie, and it was proved to be.
yeah. Witnesses. Yeah, it was proved to be witnesses there said that was not the case.
Black witnesses
Yeah,
that this guy tackled the cop into his car, got a hold of his firearm in his holster, and discharged the weapon, and that's why he fucking killed him.
yeah.
So
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown,
Ferguson.
that's it. Yeah, and Ferguson, and that guy's life's ruined. I mean,
Yeah,
do you remember why when Black Lives Matter got started? What started the movement? Why the people started it? Or what the excuse they used was to start it?
wasn't it George? Wasn't it Michael Brown?
Zimmerman.
Oh, that's right, Zimmerman. Which is it wasn't even a cop. That was some rando dude. Yeah,
But
George Zimmerman wasn't even a cop. He was just
because remember they played him up to be a wannabe cop, and he shot this
yeah,
this innocent 17-year-old black kid, and the media was showing pictures
yeah,
of him when he was like 13 to to sway the narrative, to make everybody think that this kid was this innocent looking little child, and then
yeah,
then a picture of him showed up when he was 17, and you're like, well, that boy beat the fuck out of me. I'm not gonna. Yeah, and he's
yeah.
on top of him, basically beating him to death.
Just
And
fucking
then and
hammering him.
Zimmerman
Yeah.
and Zimmerman shoots him and kills him. But that's Black Lives. That's where BLM got started.
Oh, and then
That's
the media portrayed him there. He was Cuban, I believe, or Puerto Rican. I'm not sure. He was Hispanic in
he's
Florida, so
Hispanic,
it's
but
probably one of those two.
they found like the
And
most white picture of him and then color
yeah,
edited it to
they
make
were
him
like,
look
"Oh,
even whiter.
white-looking Hispanic." You're like, dude, if you were to go to any of the Hispanics in my crew and be like, you're kind of white-looking, I think you'd offend them pretty badly. Some of them are white-looking, though. I'm darker than half of them, but like, um, but it is true though. The media spun that to make this guy look like a white guy, and he wasn't. He was Hispanic. And then they look at us and go, "You guys are racists." You
Well,
vote wall.
and you
The,
try
the,
to
the
you
whole
try to tell
the
me
top to the bottom is just messed up.
that the system is systemically racist, and your organization that's doing this got started during the Obama administration when the top cop in the country was Eric Holder, who was
Yeah,
also a black guy,
also black. Yeah,
who's a giant piece of shit, but still a black guy.
right. The
So
president's half black. Like, how do you look at as America and go, okay, you're systemically racist when if only 13% of the population is African American, some other people of other colors had to vote for the guy to get him in there. I'm just throwing that out there. Not like as a group, they can't elect anyone on that level if they only did it themselves. Like, so there's some white people out there who voted for him. There's some Hispanics, some Asians. I'm guarantee, some Indians that wanted him there too. I don't know how you look at that and go systemically racist. As a country, like you said, maybe somebody in the backwoods of upstate New York or something, or in the backwoods of Alabama or something, is still holding on to this, culturally biased thing, and you could point at that person and you could say, hey, he's a racist or she's a
correct.
racist. But the system, if you go to New York City, you're not going to be. That system is not systemically
Well,
racist.
that's the problem is when you ask somebody, okay, if we're systemically racist, point to the policy that is racist so we can
Right.
change it.
So
Show
you
it to
change
me.
it.
Show me
Right.
the racist policy because I'll help you
Doesn't
tooth and nail to change it.
doesn't
And
exist.
that's where they go into well, it's not a specific policy. It's a system as a whole. It just holds black people down. That's the shit you hear people say. And it's like, well, how do we fight that then? We can't fight that. You can't. And that's the idea. For a lot of these people, that's the idea. And my personal take on what the actual BLM, because BLM means a couple of different things depending on who you are, right? you know. But the organization themselves of Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization, and their goals are to upend the system. They're literally telling Biden right now he needs to get behind the idea of abolishing the prison system.
Right. What? I read that the other day. What? Like, are you joking?
And,
you know, and then
this is somebody who apparently has a direct line to speaking with the president right now.
Right.
That's
a Marxist. Yeah.
That's fucking great.
Right. A Marxist.
And so they see these things, these amorphous, disprovable arguments, you know, that you can't prove or disprove, but stirs up a lot of emotion. They use that to push their agenda. Because if you, because then you're damned if you, like you said, double bind. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So that's, when you boil it down to that, that alone right there is why I won't ever anything with BLM. And the idea that, dude, that day when all the corporate dipshits and everybody on Facebook put the fucking black bar with BLM or whatever on their fucking social media. Oh God, dude. I literally had to go no media for a couple of days during that period because it was so sickening to me. Because all of these idiots, it's just like gay pride, right? You know what gay pride is? It's the new fucking Valentine's Day. It's a chance for all these corporate jackasses to sell shit. That's all it is. That's all it is now. They make so much money off the fucking gay movement. It's not.
Dude, the whole concept. Like I said, I am for equality. I am for treating everybody equal. I am for equal opportunity for everyone.
What's a drill? What was it that always the drill instructors always say? I'm not racist. I hate all of you pieces of shit equally.
I hate all of you equally. Right. And it's the truth, right? At the same time, you lose me in every bit of my support the moment you start this cascade of things that are racist in your opinion. Like Uncle Ben's, the picture of Uncle Ben on the right.
Aunt Jemima
is racist. The Aunt Jemima is racist. Like I woke up one day and my fucking syrup was racist. You know what? You've lost all my support the moment you tell me that. If I can't put stuff on my pancakes without being racist, you've lost my support for your entire fucking movement. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what you represent. Aunt Jemima's not racist. Uncle Ben's not racist. And then the actors get involved. And we somehow want to hear what they have to say. And they're like, oh, only black people can do voiceovers on cartoons for black people. Like the guy who does on Family Guy.
Oh, it's the whole cultural appropriation, you know, that and you can't do fucking
right.
Like, you know, it's funny. Everybody got mad about blackface. Nobody got mad at Robert Downey Jr. for fucking that one movie, the Jungle, whatever that fucking. I mean, you think about all the great comedies of the early 2000s and shit like that, and how much funny shit was in there that people just thought was funny. Like Blazing Saddles. Old school Blazing Saddles, dude.
Never fucking fly today.
The Office. You couldn't do The Office now.
Yeah.
Or Seinfeld. Or any of these great comedies.
Yeah. And again, and these are guys who are very skilled at their craft. Like, for you to walk up and say, hey, a guy who can do throw his voice 10 different ways and do Cleveland, and all of a sudden he's stepping back and he can't do a cartoon character
because he's scared.
An Asian can't do a cartoon character of a white person
because he's scared.
Like, scared.
Before you know it, all these cartoons, people aren't going to be able to do horses anymore. The talking horses are going to have to be done by horses.
Don't put that out there for PETA. He's going to be pissed. They're going to cancel. They're going to cancel everything with an episode with an animal in it.
You know, and some of this stuff, it's all these big different ways these arguments branch off, right? Now, a lot of it boils into how much, like, this movement, everybody, you got to convince people that America sucks, right? America just needs to be changed because we suck. And it's like, you need to leave the fucking country for at least 2 weeks. Just go try. You could go to fucking, I don't care. You don't even have to go to one of the shithole countries. And yeah, I'll say shithole countries. There are the fucking most of the countries on this planet are shithole countries compared to this one.
Right.
And it's not because they believe it's not because they believe different than us. It's because they don't have fucking running water or education or internet.
They're corrupt. They're corrupt.
Oh yeah, well, corruption breeds in those places. I mean,
here in the United States we got corruption too, but
go to London, go to Paris, and tell me those places are better than us. And I don't mean as some fucking movie star who gets treated like a rock star and gets, all the red ropes part and you get treated amazingly. I mean, go as a normal person and walk
Yeah,
around. I've
to
talked
see
to
how they
guys
live.
and see what they do for a living and what rights they don't have versus what they do
Right.
have. London has cameras at almost every square inch of that. You can't fucking do anything in that fucking city. You can't do anything without being seen or recorded. Could you imagine they tried to do that here? You'd never get
It's
away with it
already
here.
almost there.
No, I mean it's
But
not
yeah,
though. I mean, there's so many laws against it. Like even local municipalities are passing laws saying you can't record people's faces without their permission. And but you get into freedom of speech. I mean, even our neighbors to the north don't have freedom of speech. Look at how many people have been arrested for the transgender misgendering bullshit, or talking. Literally, guys go to jail because they say something that the government doesn't agree with.
right.
That is so foreign to us. That doesn't even make sense to be. Wait, I got thrown in jail because I disagreed with Trump? Could you imagine? I mean, if people thought Trump was even 1/10 the bad guy he was, he'd have been throwing people in jail left and right. So the idea that this country sucks, and because they go dig up the worst parts of what we've done as a nation, right? And there are some horrible fucking things.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
like
we're not
locking
safe.
the Japanese learn their method of doing what they did to the Chinese and the Philippines, the Filipinos in World War II, and how they treated them. They got the inspiration from what we did to the Indians. The Nazis learned their fucking tradecraft as far as propaganda, and the whole eugenics movement came from the United States.
Yeah,
Now, not as a country, not as a country policy.
concept though.
Slavery, all this other stuff. But slavery is one that I don't get too hung up on because it was everywhere and it's been everywhere. It still exists. Slavery is a human condition.
Right now, you can go to Africa and see slaves.
Well, not just that. I mean,
Right now,
everywhere. I mean, and it
everywhere.
depends on what you want to condition as slavery, right?
You
What
can go
is
to Asia right now and see slaves. The buy me drinking
so
girls in Okinawa.
that doesn't and now
They
I'm
are
not,
indentured
and now
servitude.
Now, I'm not trying to say that this is all okay because this all happened. That's not what I'm trying to say. But when you take those into scale compared to the net positives that the United States has done, the world
Right.
is a far better place for us being here.
Yeah.
If we
Thank
didn't
God for the United
if
States.
we
Yeah.
didn't exist, it's scary to think what the world would be like right now. Because there would be no free place on the planet.
Right. And that, and that
I mean, think
is
think
good.
about if a
Right.
totalitarians had taken over the United States, and the United States was another kingdom or another fucking non-democratically free nation. For one, they're probably it sucks that the Indians got their land stolen and blah 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 all that, but there probably wouldn't be any Indians if the Chinese or the fucking Germans had come here.
Right. They'd be
The
done. They'd be gone.
there sure shit wouldn't be a guy launching spaceships that land back on drone ships in the middle of the fucking ocean to get
Right.
reused again.
That's what, SpaceX is huge right now. And you look at the difference in policy. Well,
And he's not even a fucking American. He's a South African who moved to the United States
as a
because
divorced kid.
because
Yeah.
of the opportunity.
Right. And you look at it, like under Obama, we can go into it in a million different ways, but he took the funding away from NASA. In the space program. And now under Trump, you look at the difference in administrations. Under Trump, we've refired it back up with kind of a private government pairing, if you will.
Now, I don't hold Obama too much bad for that because NASA was super fucked up, and they didn't just. It wasn't just that they took away funding; they shifted it for the SLS system, and you can
And
get
they
into
were
the
settling anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
you can get. I mean, the space shuttle was not a. It
old.
wasn't. Well, it wasn't just that it was old; it was unsafe. And it wasn't until the disasters started happening that we realized how unsafe the space shuttle really was as a program. But
Right.
aside from that, I mean, you can get into the argument about the SLS and how it's a complete fucking debacle and a complete waste of money, especially considering when you see what SpaceX has done.
Right.
But aside from that, it
Fraction
wasn't
of the
just.
cost.
The answer was is that instead of coming up with our own system or finding a way to make it do, we pay Russians fucking 50, 60, 70 million dollars per person to launch them into space.
I know you've heard me say this before. I mean, fucking JFK must be spinning like a rotisserie chicken when you heard that. Just it's amazing how
On the same rockets that the Russians
The
have been using for
Russian-
fucking 60, I think it's 60 years, dude. It's right around that rocket system that the Russians still use, the Soyuz. It's like 60 years old, man, if not older.
right, and we're like, oh, let's let the Russians take us to our space station that we paid the majority of anyway. Like
I saw one of those modules when I was a kid, dude, in Huntsville. When my mom took me up to the Huntsville Space Center when we were living in Alabama. I saw them
Oh, cool.
building one of the modules in the clean. There was a clean room. It had like a walk by area you could walk by. So I
That's
actually got
awesome.
to physically see one of the space station modules as it was being built. I couldn't tell you. I could probably go back and look and figure out which one it was, but I couldn't tell you. I don't remember.
Right.
But
I mean, in America, in the United States, we have done so much good. Like we've opened the opportunity and opened the doors for people to do so much here. I mean, you look at the
invention, medical,
invention after invention. The curing polio, all that stuff started here.
raising people around the planet out of poverty.
Correct.
And not as a
You know,
governmental system. I'm talking about all because of all the very rich people in the country that go and do philanthropic. God, I can't fucking whatever. You know what word I'm trying to say. All of the money that leaves the United States to help the rest of the world.
philanthropy,
Well,
philanthropy.
philanthropy is one of them, but it's philanthropic, I think. Something like that.
Okay.
But listen to two Marines trying to argue about fucking grammar or words and definitions and
All these
shit right
symbolic
now.
words. This is why we don't say those.
Big words bad, too many syllables. Give me some crayons. But I mean, people like Angelina Jolie or the Carnegies, or raising. It's that whole idea that rising tide lifts all boats. The United
And we put
States
them to
is
work in their own country.
the
Put them to work
United
in their own country.
States is doing better than everybody else, but that's not a bad thing because
No.
we've helped everywhere else. I mean, look at Japan, dude. We dropped 2 fucking nuclear bombs on them, and then we went over and helped them rebuild their society.
Right. And then China too. There was, I believe it was last year, the year before last, 300 million Chinamen, Chinese people, whatever's not racist.
Yeah, I
I don't
think
know
China.
anymore.
I don't think you can say anything and not be racist anymore.
I don't. 300 million of the countrymen in China. There we go.
I got barked at for
joined the
saying
middle
African American.
class. That is the entire fucking population of
The
the
United
United States
States.
over in China
Yeah, but no offense.
came to the middle class.
What is middle class in China though? That's something I would like to see.
Well, okay,
Because
so fair
the
argument, but I'm just saying, like,
300 million people, when probably several billion are still in what we would consider abject. They're happy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being critical,
right.
but by
But it's
our
because
our standards, they're in abject poverty. When more than half of their population, which I think it is still considered below the poverty level. 300,000 is a fucking drop in the bucket, dude.
But at the same time, though, the point is
Plus, those
that
are numbers
because
from
of
the
United
Chinese
States,
communists.
our
That's
consumerism. That's what drove the business and got them the jobs.
don't use consumerism. Consumerism is a bad thing. Consumerism is why we have fridges that last 3 years and lawnmower. You had a lawnmower that was 70 years old that ran better than one that was brand new.
Oh yeah.
The consumerism is a bad thing.
But you know what I mean?
Capitalistic
Whatever.
free market societies are a good thing.
Yeah, capitalists.
Consumerism is why they make money off the Black Lives Matter movement and fucking gay pride and Valentine's Day and Christmas. That's why consumerism is Black Friday, where people are trampling on each other in Walmart to get a fucking TV.
Oh yeah, that shit's ill. I'll never do that again. I did
that's
that one year.
That's the only reason I bark at you about consumerism, because that's what consumerism is.
Fair enough. Wrong word. But you had touched on it earlier. You said the only way for this to be successful is then for the other side or people within here, the Marxists, to run the United States down. And I was looking up under Bill Clinton. The United States was building an electron collider, and it was
the one in Texas, right?
It was in Texas, and he spent like $2 billion on it, and they were like, "Oh man, it's way over budget," and they shut it down. Well, part of the argument in the background behind that was the one over in Sweden, right, or Switzerland. That one was being constructed too, and this one would compete with that. And they were like, well, you just want to have American superiority. That's why you're building one that's twice the size in Texas. Why not? Why can't we build the biggest one here and bring
fucking goddamn right
from around the world to the United States?
Maybe it's just because we grew up with Tim the Toolman Taylor, but fucking more power.
You want an electron collider? We'll build one in Texas. It's
Fuck
bigger.
yeah, and it's Texas, so we're gonna make it bigger. You say shit like that, and I you say shit like that, and I chuckle, and I think it's the movie First Contact with Jodie Foster. I think I've got my actress right and my movie right, but when they build that big fucking gyroscopy looking fucking machine, and it gets blown up by the terrorists, and they have another one secretly built in South Asia somewhere, and the one guy's like, Why build one when you can build two for twice the cost, kind of thing, I think was the line or something. And that's government spending. So when anybody in the government starts talking about saving money, you know they're fucking lying,
You're full of
because
shit.
there's something else, and they're just using that as their argument. There's another reason they don't care about saving money. They love they love spending money more than the fucking Real Housewives of whatever TV show.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, budget for the United States or for anything in government, they just don't understand it, and it's not. It's like we come from a construction background where every dime is accounted for, but for
Every
them,
dime and every minute.
right, in every minute, and that's the beauty of the private sector. That's the beauty of America is you can do that and be super successful. Government doesn't have that restraint. They're like, we got to win the war.
Well, they don't have that. They don't have that carrot. There's no profit carrot for them, which there shouldn't be. There shouldn't. I'm not arguing that there should be, but that's the problem. So there has to be. We have to find something that makes the government want to do better. And at the end of the day, what that is just fucking make it smaller and let the private sector figure it out. Right. Hold places. If somebody does something super illegal, like imports children for labor, or dumps toxic barrels into the fucking Hudson, or kills their workers unsafely, hold them the fuck accountable. I'm okay with that. I have no fucking problem with holding people accountable. But the idea that we're going to prevent things by legislation isn't going to happen, because you make all this EPA regulation, you still have people that pollute. You still have people. I mean, look at where the safety regulations in this industry are, and how many people they killed on that project in Las Vegas.
Right.
What, I can't remember what the name of it was. They were building that big hotel complex thing they were building downtown. They killed a bunch of people, dude. And a fatality in the construction industry is insane.
It's I would say, it's obviously probably one of the highest out of all the industries.
I think they killed 3 people in like 8 months, dude.
Yeah, that is way higher than anywhere you see. But overseas, that's not the case. They're like, oh, we'll get another guy.
Oh yeah, you look at what Saudi Arabia
No, I was saying, when you go overseas and you see their standards and how they construct, we chuckle and we laugh, but literally somebody gets hurt, they're just like, okay, there's another guy.
There's guys in line.
There's guys in line, right? And they just don't care. Here, God forbid, had a death on a project, everything would stop. There'd be investigations for months, and the whole bit, So how we do things here is, in that aspect is a good thing. A little bit of regulation is not a bad thing, But like you said, hold them accountable,
Well, one of the things that the United States is still doing really well, even though our education system here sucks in general as far as what we do with kids.
Terrible.
And even the universities now are making me sick to my stomach because they don't teach anything anymore. They indoctrinate. But the actual schools that do teach still do a brain drain from the rest of the country, which I think is a good thing. You bring the best of everywhere else to here. Yeah, it sucks that India, that we're bringing scientists from India over here to do our stuff. But at the end of the day, a lot of them come here, get educated, and then go back with them.
And then they improve their own country.
But they bring the systems from here to their country to make things better. I mean, think about it, dude. If China, if we could ever get along, and I don't think we ever will, because our cultures are so dynamically opposed from one another. Like cheat in the Chinese culture, cheating isn't a bad thing. It's just competition. To them, cheating, there is this concept of cheating is completely different to them culturally, and to the point to where you can't even you can't say cheating is bad. Like we say, oh my God, they stole shit from us, and they're like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
So culturally, I don't know that we'd ever be able to get on a cooperative level with China. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But could you imagine what we could do as a planet if you could get cooperation on the level of everybody benefiting, not just one side trying to take from the other or beat the other down or to be better than the other, but mutual cooperation? The power of China and the United States, everybody looks at us, anybody who's halfway intelligent sees us as foes, because we are. Ideologies are completely they're completely opposite.
Diametrically opposed.
Diametrically opposed. Everything that communism stands for is against what freedom is. And that's what the United States is about freedom. I mean, you're looking at it right now with everybody trying to lock down. I don't know if you saw in Buffalo the other night, all those people in Buffalo that ran the sheriff and the community or the local health official out of a bunch of business owners were having a meeting talking about what they were going to do with the lockdown, and somebody anonymously reported them because there was more than 10 people in the building, right? So the sheriff shows up and they basically ran him out of the building. Like, you have a warrant? No, get the fuck out of here. Go away.
Good.
You're trespassing now if you don't have a warrant. So get out of here. Is what it boiled down to.
Good.
And you're going to start to, you're going to start to see more of it, dude. You're going to start to see more of it. These lockdowns only worked when people thought they were going to do something.
Right. And now we've seen the evidence
and the costs weren't more. The cost of the lockdown wasn't higher than the reward or than the cost of the coronavirus, which it might they might not still be, dude. The coronavirus might the fallacy of the argument that the coronavirus is less deadly than the flu completely negates the fact that the coronavirus is immensely more, makes up for that by how contagious it is. It might kill less people on a percentage basis, but when it infects 10 times as many people, that's your problem.
Right. But again, in the beginning, we were told that there were going to be 5-6 million deaths. There were going to be bodies lined up in Central Park and all this, and that just didn't happen. And it wasn't in part because of the lockdowns, but we were compliant with the lockdowns because we thought that was what was going to happen, and it didn't. And the data came out. We realized how the infection rates worked. We realized which population subsets were susceptible, and once you realize that it doesn't affect kids nearly as much as it affects the senior citizens, and you can locally okay, maybe mom and pop kettle need to stay in their house a little bit more and stay distanced, but my kids can go to school and be just fine.
Right.
And the percentages of children having this thing is so low. So I think we do need to reject it because you've got people who can out safety the next guy. And that's all they're caring about is look, I locked everybody down. This guy didn't, and 5 people died over there. We won't tell you about how many people died over here. It's all bullshit.
I fully believe that the discourse of the coronavirus went the way it did because the media wanted to hurt Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the primary driver. There's a lot of facts about coronavirus that they talk about that are correct, but the reason that they drove so much fear and they drove it in the direction they did, and
it's because it was election year.
Because it was an election year and they wanted to hurt Trump. And they did. It worked. It fucking worked.
The economy was on fire.
So they got a double whammy with it. They made Trump look like a fucking idiot for how he handled it. And then it hurt the economy, the best thing he had going for him that was going to convince everybody to vote for him. They took both of those hit Trump and probably cost him the election. Not probably. Oh, yeah. I mean, I can say probably. I don't know, but that's more than likely why Trump didn't win, or probably isn't going to win. I mean, we'll see what happens. But the way we sit right now, we'll put it that way. So you look at and the thing that bothers me the most is when you look at the numbers, and it's hard to trust the numbers for one, but because nobody has a non-biased approach to why they're presenting certain numbers anymore. Everybody's using statistics, you got lies, damn lies, and then you got statistics kind of thing. But when you look at states that lock down versus states that different, there is no clear comparison to which ones did better. There's some states that locked down that did great. There's other states that locked down that did terrible. There's states that opened up that did terrible, and there's states that are opened up that never locked down that did just fine.
Right.
Because there's so many.
That's why it needs to be a local matter.
Exactly.
Not a federal matter.
There's so many variables that you can't have one comprehensive solution for the whole country. And the idea that local municipalities need federal guidance on what to do is a fucking cop-out. That's because the local officials don't want to be held accountable. They want to do what they're told so that if it goes wrong, and this gets back to what we were talking about, they can point the finger. They don't care about, and that's why this is why they're all for lockdowns. This is why they want to do lockdowns, because they know they're not going to get blamed politically in the media for, this business going out of business, or them going bankrupt, or that person committing suicide because they lost their job, or this guy beating his wife because he's drinking because he's out of work. The politicians aren't going to get blamed for that. But you can be goddamn sure that if, 100 people die because they didn't lock down, because they're already doing that. They're already blaming it. Unless you're in New York and you're Andrew Cuomo and you don't get blamed for anything, even though you've killed more people.
Emmy, a fucking Emmy.
No, not an Emmy. What the fuck is it? It's not an
He said it was
Emmy.
an Emmy.
No, Emmy's like for movies and shit.
Yeah,
It's no, it's not
yeah.
an Emmy.
Yes, dude.
No,
Let me pull
it's
it up. They gave him
but
an Emmy
they want it.
for.
They want to give him an
I don't know if they
award.
gave it to him, but he's up for an Emmy because of
No, he's
his
up for some.
1100.
He's up for some award, but it's not the Emmy. That's all I'm saying.
I'm
The
telling you, it was the Emmy. Okay,
he's
wrong. I'm wrong. Hold on. Cuomo.
it doesn't matter. Point being is it just shows you how lopsided it is, right? They
Right.
go after the guy in Florida for what he's doing with opening his beaches up, and even after opening up the government and their deaths spiked and then came back down, not opening up the state, they still didn't even scratch how many people died in New York. And you've literally got New York City where you had people in March, at the point now where they're attacking Trump for not doing things fast enough. You had people down in fucking Chinatown saying it's racist if you don't come down to Chinatown.
Right. Oh yeah. What's her name?
Nancy Pelosi and
Nancy
fucking
Pelosi. Yeah, she had a parade.
Chuck
Dude,
Schumer.
I just pulled it up. Social media left incredulous after Governor Cuomo is awarded Emmy Founders Award. So
Maybe it is an
Founders
Emmy.
Award, and for his masterful quote unquote COVID press conferences. So this guy has been charged with and accused of hurting elderly by forcing them back into nursing homes, where they call that like a super spreader or whatever, and they're giving him an Emmy for real life.
I mean, it falls on par
For
for
real
giving
life.
it falls on par for giving the president that killed more people with drones a fucking Nobel Peace Prize.
Nobel Peace Prize, and then you say the guy who ended wars, pulled our troops out, and then has executed more bad people and ended ISIS and had peace break out in the Middle East for the first time in my adult life. You're calling him a fascist and you're calling him a racist, and he's the terrible warmonger. Like he's like the antithesis of all that, And you're like, oh yeah, Trump's bad, Orange Man bad. Could you imagine being the first Jordanian attack jet to land in like Israel?
Right? Yeah. You guys sure?
I'm gonna be here now.
You guys are sure you cleared this, right? You're sure that this is safe?
Flying plane, like oh, don't they turn the
he's doing like 3 laps at the border. We told you to cross, but I don't wanna.
I swear to God, if you shoot me down, I'm gonna be pissed. All right?
He's sitting there. He's got one hand on the stick and the other on the ejection handle.
Ejection, I see a missile. This thing's going down.
First wrong beep I hear.
Everything's kind of, like I said, everything's just kind of backwards. Like you point your finger at the bad guy who created peace in the Middle East by skirting the damn. What was it? The Palestinians. He just skirted them. He was like, you know what? We're not going to even talk about you guys. We're just going to go ahead and strike an accord with these other people who do want to cooperate. And kind of by virtue of, like you said, like the rising tide raises all ships. Sooner or later, they're going to be, ostracized.
Well, they're so isolated now that you see. And the scary thing is, dude, is Biden's going to go back to his old, exactly what their policies were prior to Trump. The ones that everybody, the guy that said was going to cause World War III has the planet in the most calm state geopolitically that it's ever been.
Correct.
All these deals that Trump has swung, I'm afraid are gonna. I mean, he's gonna sign the Iranian. He's gonna go right back into the Iranian treaty again, which I don't know legally. I don't know how. I mean, we'll figure out how all that's gonna work. But the treaty that Trump pulled out of, that Iranian peace deal, that was a complete crock of shit. Biden's gonna try and launch that right back up again. And then I talked about it in my video, some of the shit with guns. I mean, we'll see what they can do without legislation. If they don't get the Senate, they're obviously going to try through executive order, which means it's going to be lawsuits. But that means I'm going to have, there's going to be shit we're going to be in limbo. Like, are we felons now or are we not felons?
Right.
Because the ATF, even under Trump, the ATF was doing stupid shit.
Right.
You can kiss any chance of us getting a suppressor bill passed. It's fucking gone out the window now.
Right. Because of just stupidity. Like everywhere else, it's a safety program. Like, yeah,
it's fucking, it's required.
Right. But here in America, we're like, no, this is something special. You can't have it. It's so dumb. And the people who see that, they don't know, like, they've never read the Second Amendment. They're like, well, you just need to self-protect. I mean, you don't need 100 rounds. hey, that's not what the Second Amendment says. Nothing about personal protection. It says nothing about hunting. It says to keep the government in check.
Well,
You know,
well, it doesn't say anything. It's intended about being able to protect yourself from people and government. And
government,
it's
right?
funny because everybody talks about, you can't, these fallacious arguments where, oh, the government has drones and nuclear weapons, and it's like, you are so far off out of even understanding what this discussion is about. It's not even funny.
Right.
The idea isn't
But
necessarily, it's this idea that you can't, it doesn't matter who you are, you're not going to be able to force people to do things ever. Like, it
right,
doesn't even come across the table because of that. So you don't have to worry about it. The reason we don't have to worry about the government ever being totalitarian is because it can't. It can't
right,
get there. Beyond, I mean, it can get there to certain degrees, but it can't be a full totalitarian state, where they throw people on fucking trains and fucking ship them to concentration camps. They did it with the Japanese.
right,
So you're going to tell me that the government can never get there is a fucking load of shit.
right. No, the government, yeah. I mean, they're pulling at it now, trying
They
to
can
get
they can do it on little
totality.
scales. They can do it on little scales.
Right. But
The only thing that prevented them from rounding everybody up in fucking California is the idea that people are going to defend themselves. They were able to do the Japanese because they got everybody so scared of one race of people. By the way, that was a Democrat. Keep that in mind. The only
right,
guy that fucking rounded up people based on race and put them in a fucking camp, U.S. citizen or not, was a fucking Democrat and one that a lot of people fucking revere, even though he was a
yeah,
giant piece of shit.
yep.
Um,
Fucking amazing.
you know,
I forgot about that. But yeah, you know, again, the argument again, there will be armed citizens. I mean, for the government to be so scared, we got to take this away from your neighbor. And I mean, there's got to be certain regulations. You don't want your neighbor fucking packing C4, making his own, making his own Tomahawk missiles or something next door and blows up the neighborhood. I mean, you got to have certain regulations. I get it, but the idea that the government, has to regulate us because we're a problem when they have an A-10 and
well,
drones and all the rest of it,
pretty
they are
simple,
not
dude.
scared of us.
Pretty simple, dude. You saw the worst riots and the most violent riots were in places where gun control was heavy gun control.
The strictest. Correct. Yep.
An armed society is inherently more polite.
Oh, it's polite. Oh yeah. You
So
know,
say what
I,
you will, that's one good thing that comes out of it. Nobody's gonna go fucking going into a neighborhood and kick down doors when the state has a very liberal gun policy, and they know that there's probably, you know, they don't want to roll the dice that 4 out of 5 of these houses has a armed somebody in the house.
right, have shotguns. Right.
At the
You
very
know,
least.
I go back to like my dog he was young, he got out of control. I think I've told you this before. And he went down, like we were hiking up there in the mountains in the national forest, and he saw another dog, and he skirted down. Like us humans have to do the switchback to get down to where the parking lot is. He could just go straight down, so he did. We called, he didn't respond. He was just he was a puppy, and we were still training him. And I get there, and like you can see the guy's face. You can see the guy's face. He is pissed off at me like you've never believed because my dog's playing with his dogs, and I don't know why, but he was angry. You could see the anger from 100 yards away. But what he couldn't see until I got about 15 yards away was the fact that I was open carrying my knife to the left. And the moment he recognized that I had a 45 on my belt,
You could
the
see
anger
that.
just
You could
the
see
anger
that.
just melted
Right.
off. Yeah, he could see it. He called his dogs. They hopped in. He got in his truck and he drove away. I called my dog and that was it. But I mean, the anger that the whole situation diffused, and it was because I was carrying a firearm, guaranteed. If not, that guy would have been in my face, And that's just a simple example. Like I didn't
Yeah.
carry that for him. I carried it because we were in the woods with mountain lions and bears.
Right.
Bears but it helped him, and so, but yeah, and again, it's blinding ignorance. Like what is it? Will Smith, he says a person is smart, people are dumb. Like
Yeah. All right, John. With that, I think we call her. I got to go make some dinner or at least help make dinner, and get on with the rest of my evening. I know
yeah,
you
me
got to
too.
get up tomorrow to go to work, so I think we'll
Yeah,
we'll
like
wrap
3
her
a.m.
up there. Thank you,
I'm
everybody.
privileged.
Yeah, right. Privileged to go to work. We'll
So,
appreciate everybody who hung out and listened. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's super important to help grow the channel, which is the whole point of this. Kind of get our word out there and spread the good word, at least what we think is a good word. I imagine there's a lot of people that don't, but fuck them. So,
They're not humans like us.
we, we're too privileged.
We're too
So
privileged.
we'll see everybody on the next episode or on the next episode. We thank you for watching.
Yep.
We'll see you later.
See you next week. Semper Fi.